Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today we're talking more about vaccines. Continuing on from the topic in the last video, SB 276, which is a bill out here in California, essentially eliminating medical exemptions to the vaccine schedule. California had already eliminated the personal, religious, and philosophical exemption back in 2015 with SB 277. The same state senator who introduced that bill was the one who introduced this one. Now he's also got a bill to mandate adult vaccination, as well as some other hyper-draconian measures with really loose language, like one of the upcoming bills that the health officer can use any and all means necessary to contain or prevent a communicable disease outbreak. Right, so just granting wide latitude powers to these health officers of the state, right, replacing the function of the doctor in issuing medical exemptions and replacing that with the unelected bureaucracy of the California Department of Public Health. And I'm going to do my best to just be positive here and tell you guys what's going on and kind of look forward to the future, because I've spent kind of the whole day just being enraged about this. And it's not that I'm enraged that they've taken something from me, right? Again, like I said in the last video, we are very fortunate in this family that Space Panther doesn't have to, work. We don't have to have dual incomes, and, we can, and luckily I now, essentially work from home, so we can homeschool Isla, and we will homeschool Isla. And, what's horrible about this is all of the people who don't have the means. It's an inherently discriminatory law. I mean, again, it's against people who don't have the financial means to completely just say no to the entire public school system. I fully acknowledge there's a lot of people who just can't do that. I mean, and we pay taxes, right? And there's, in order to even, it's not like we're going to put Isla in public school anyway. But, I mean, the sheer fact that they're going to deny her even the right to attend school is just, it strikes me as, pretty insanely evil. And, draconian doesn't even cover it. And, basically, so I'm just going to talk about this for a little bit. Again, I might get a little saucy here, but you know what? I hate these people. It's not even Senator Pan, right? I hate Senator Pan with a passion. I won't say everything that I think about him because I'd probably get banned from YouTube. But, it's Gavin Newsom. I hate Gavin Newsom. He's a useless human being and has no principles. But he's a typical politician, right? And, he campaigns on all this fluffy nonsense, this bullshit, California for all. And when it comes down to it, I mean, he bends over for the will of Pharma. He'll bend over for whoever basically tells him that he needs to for the sake of the party, right? And I kind of blew up on Twitter this morning, kind of attracted the ire of all the pro-vaccine cultists and all the shills for pharmaceutical. And, by saying, what, California State Senator Dick Pan, Richard Pan, I call him Dick Pan. He's a vile, disgusting excuse for a human being. He's basically brought an actual medical tyranny fascist medical tyranny to the state of California. And, now he has the gall to basically call people racist. And all these pro-vaccine cultists are calling people racist because we're comparing Dick Pan to the authoritarian Chinese communists of, Chairman Mao and the rest of them. Right. You know what? He would be better suited in the Chinese Communist Party. His family's from Taiwan. I fully acknowledge the difference between Taiwan and China. China doesn't acknowledge that difference. So, as far as I'm concerned, he's a Chinaman. And he's a communist Chinaman. And he would be better suited in the Chinese Communist Party. That's not even a prejudiced, rage-filled statement right there. I might hate him. I might be filled with rage, but that right there is just a pure logic. If he really believes that people don't have the right to medical autonomy and autonomy over their bodies, he belongs in a communist authoritarian regime like China or Nazi Germany or anything, right? That's the Nuremberg Code, which emerged from World War II, and everything that came out of the National Socialist Germany and the Japanese Empire, was they were committing all these grotesque, just unbelievably horrifying and sickening chemical weapons tests on people, right? Everybody heard about the German National Socialists and all the things that they did, but not many people learned about what was happening in Japan. because there was never, we just basically dropped the bombs and that was it, right? There wasn't that, a ground level cleaning up of the territory. But Japan was doing things as evil, if not more evil, than the German National Socialists. And, this is what the Nuremberg Code, which came out of it, was that the voluntary informed consent of the human subject is absolutely essential, right? The bill was mainly about human experimentation, but as far as I'm concerned, the mass vaccine program and mandatory vaccine program is a mass human experiment. We don't have any double-blind placebo safety studies for the vaccines. It's a simple fact. All these shills will say, oh yeah, no, they're tested for safety. No, they're not. We even, in the video that I did, basically a couple months ago, examining the severe adverse event rates reported by the World Health Organization. And, I'll show that video at the end here again. I've been sharing it all over Twitter, basically just making the point that in the range of about 3,000 to 16,000, if you include the entire vaccine schedule, your child is 16,000 times more likely to be permanently injured or killed by the vaccine schedule than all of the diseases that the vaccines are designed to prevent combined. I'll say that again. You are 16,000 times more likely to be permanently injured or killed by the vaccines than by the diseases they are designed to prevent. The cost-benefit analysis for these products is absolutely insane. And they want to mandate it because they know how weak they are. They know how close that they are to oblivion. The cabal, this is their last shot, and I called it 2 years ago. The pharmaceutical industry is the last gasp of the cabal, of these evil Satanists, this deep state, this shadow government that has infected our society. All right, these parasitic humans who walk around, in human skin, but they are actually vile, evil, degenerate creatures, and they feel no empathy. They have no soul, and they will see 1,000 people fed into the wood chipper, 1 million people, 100 million people fed into the wood chipper, with not even a twitch. They'll keep sipping their tea, and watch all these people just get sacrificed as long as they get a buck for it. Right? They're filthy, evil people, just like the Sacklers of Purdue Pharmaceutical, the manufacturers of OxyContin. Right? All of these executives of the pharmaceutical companies are traitors to America, and they're convicted felons, right? Literally, there have been, cases brought, and they are all convicted felons. Let's kick it. Vioxx, which goes through actual drug testing, right, supposedly, killed 500,000 Americans, right? And that's the verified amount. Who knows what the actual total is? But that's a drug that actually went through double-blind placebo studies, right? And that drug killed 500,000 Americans. Vaccines do not even undergo that level of safety studies. They are literally completely untested as far as a placebo. They are comparing one vaccinated population to another vaccinated population, which is completely useless bullshit science. And I don't care what sort of letters anybody has at the end of their name. If you think that's actual science to compare a vaccinated population to a vaccinated population as far as studies, you're a dumbass. You're a stupid person with a tiny pea brain, and I have no respect for you whatsoever. And feel free to let me know in the comment section below if you disagree. But as far as I'm concerned, you're lobotomized. You're dumber than a kid with autism. No disrespect to the kid with autism, right? In fact, a lot of these kids with autism, they're fully functional, hyper intelligent people, and they're trapped inside of their brain because their parents harmed them. And you know what? We're well past the time of niceties and being polite and all positivity and kumbaya. You are harming your children if you vaccinate your child. That's the simple fact, right? And I'm not saying this to basically throw people in the dirt and say you're a bad parent. But you know what? At a certain point, it needs to be said, if you vaccinate your kid, you are subjecting them to neurological damage and gastrointestinal damage, and it's your fault if they get harmed. It's your doctor's fault as well. It's the pharmaceutical companies as well. It's the federal government's as well. But primarily, it's your fault as a parent for not doing the research and bowing to the pressure of social opprobrium and, the Matrix narrative, which is so specious and devoid of actual facts. They basically just say, oh, it's 1 in a million. All these severe adverse events, they're just 1 in a million. Some of them, individual reactions to an individual vaccine, are in the range of a few per million. But when you combine them all together for all of the vaccines and all the doses, what you end up with is in the range of about 11% based on the reported statistics from the World Health Organization related to the actual severe adverse events that have been documented again by then. At the beginning of the whole document in the webpage, they'll say, oh, vaccines are so far less dangerous than the diseases they're designed to prevent. And the video that I made basically showed that that is complete bullshit. That all of the diseases that vaccines are designed to prevent combined, the permanent injury and death rate combined is in the order of 8 per million children. Okay? 8 per million. And that is basically less than most of the severe adverse events individually for individual vaccines. Right? So they're straight up lying to you when they tell you that vaccines are safe and their side effects are less harmful than the diseases that they're designed to prevent. They are absolutely 100% lying to you based on the data that they have published in their own reports. You don't even have to go to InfoWars. You don't have to go to, any of the other, actual websites that are really diving into this thing. You can literally go to the World Health Organization vaccine injury adverse event sheets, info sheets, and tally up the same numbers. Again, it's all open source. I've made my table available to the public. This is basically, they're throwing it in your face. They show you the numbers of the harm, and then they'll say, no, it's safe, right? Because they're liars. They are liars. The CDC has patents for vaccines, and anybody who takes them seriously is a moron, a total moron. And, basically I'll just kind of read this article and get into it, but, this is a dark day for the United States and a dark day for California, and if you think this is just going to stop in California, you got another thing coming, my friend. Many states have already eliminated the personal, philosophical, and religious exemption, as California did with Dick Pan back in 2015. And again, they promised, we're going to leave a wide latitude for the medical exemption. We're not touching the medical exemption. This is just about those crazy religious people, right? Pan promised over and over and over again that this was going to be left to the doctors and the patient, medical exemptions would not be touched, and here we are 4 years later, and he's like, what promises? I'd never made any promises. Right? He's a degenerate scumbag, and he should go back to communist China. Anyway, here's the article by the LA Times. California vaccine bill signed by Newsom as protesters are arrested at Capitol. Right, California will enact sweeping new restrictions on medical exemptions for vaccines under bills signed by Governor Gavin Newsom on Monday, despite near-constant protests in the state capitol that resulted in arrests after opponents blocked entrances to the State House and temporarily shut down legislative sessions. Newsom signed Senate Bill 276 by Senator Richard Pan, Democrat of Sacramento, soon after the state legislature gave final approval to a separate bill, SB 714, that contained fixes. Fixes, right? They're not fixes. It's even more draconian. It's all just a sick joke. Newsom also signed SB 714. Newsom said the legislation provides new tools to better protect the public health and does so in a way that ensures parents, doctors, public health officials, and school administrators all know the rules of the road moving forward. This whole thing is a joke. There's literally no fraudulent medical exemptions being issued, as Pan claims, that is the basis for this entire legislation. There's one doctor, Dr. Bob Sears, who is under review and penalty by the California Medical Board for issuing medical exemptions. There's no proof that any of them were fraudulent at all. It's not like the California Medical Board is actually a non-partial institution. I mean, they're all bought and paid for by Pharma. The entire industry, the entire profession of medical doctors is owned by the Rockefellers, and basically the American Medical Association and Pharma and oil are literally Siamese twins, if you go back and you actually understand your history. Anyway, the rules of the road going forward. What a joke. Together, the two bills would create state oversight of medical exemptions for vaccines required to attend public and private schools, as well as daycare centers. So again, it's not even like we weren't going to go to public school. We were going to do a Waldorf school or Montessori or something like that, and now we don't even have that option. You either vaccinate or you don't get to participate in anything. You basically got to dodge public child care and child education altogether, which we will, game on. On Monday, the Senate passed SB 714 27-11, while the Assembly approved it 43-14. After the vote in the Assembly, protesters shut down the floor session with chants of "Protect our children" as lawmakers hurriedly left the chamber. The legislature passed SB 276 last week. Quote, "I thank the governor for standing with science and once again making California a leader in safeguarding children and communities from diseases that threaten our public health." This guy's a dumbass. Pan said in a statement after Newsom signed his bill. Quote, "It is my hope that parents whose vulnerable children could die from vaccine-preventable diseases will be reassured that we are protecting communities that have been left vulnerable because a few unscrupulous doctors are undermining community immunity by selling inappropriate medical exemptions." You know what? How much did your vote and your support cost, Pan? What are you selling, you degenerate piece of shit? Right? I mean, the doctors who actually were performing granting medical exemptions were performing genetic tests, blood tests, things to evaluate the child to see if they were worthy of a medical exemption, which many children are because the vaccines are neurotoxic. It's not that hard to justify in medical science an exemption to the schedule, right? And, we'll get into the fraudulent and criminal aspects of how this came about and where Pan even got the notion that there were fraudulent medical exemptions here coming up. California already has some of the nation's tightest childhood immunization laws, allowing doctors to excuse children either temporarily or permanently from some or all vaccinations if there is a medical reason. Okay, well, not anymore. That sentence is dumb given the topic of the article. Supporters of the legislation have alleged that a handful of doctors are writing unnecessary exemptions. Who are these people? These are bureaucrats. These are politicians. And they're talking about a medical doctor's, basically order based on his own understanding of the body of medical science, and they're saying it's unnecessary. Who the fuck do these people think they are? It is unbelievable. The hubris and just the raw, naked tyranny that we're seeing before our very eyes right here, right? A handful of doctors, and again, a handful. So why are we not just letting the California Medical Board do their job, since they already are with Bob Sears and putting him on probation? There's already a mechanism of redress if there are, in fact, fraudulent, unnecessary medical exemptions. So this is completely unnecessary, even given the current state of things, even assuming that he's correct, which he's not. That basically, why would we make a redundant bureaucratic enterprise to replace an enterprise, nominally, ostensibly made up of doctors, the California Medical Board? The whole premise of this thing is so stupid. And again, if you can see this through a metaphysical lens, they are so desperate, and they are trying so hard to jam this down our throats, and it's going to backfire on them. It already is backfiring on them. They are going to create a revolution, and they already are. And again, we'll get into that in a second. I did my best to transform all the evil bullshit in the world today and just come with a positive message, and we'll get into that. Basically, the requested changes, which were put in SB 714 made public on Friday, call for delaying when some medical exemptions would be reviewed by the state, but also invalidate medical exemptions written by doctors who have faced disciplinary action, regardless of whether the punishment was related to immunizations. So again, this is the addendum bill makes it even more draconian, not less draconian. And so again, Bob Sears, like literally every single medical exemption he has ever written will now be invalidated, and any doctor who's brought before the board for anything will have all of theirs invalidated. Does this sound like a logical piece of legislation to you? Because if it does, you're an idiot. Right? So there's people protesting. Opponents of the vaccine bills had hoped Newsom would loosen guidelines on who would qualify for medical exemptions under SB 276, or that the governor's reluctance was a signal he would veto the bill. Instead, the companion bill seemed to anger anti-vaccine activists who have remained a fixture outside the governor's office. On Monday morning, 3 women were detained for blocking the garage entrance to the Capitol, which is used by lawmakers as protests continued outside the State House. 7 arrests were made as of Monday afternoon, California Highway Patrol officers said. Quote, SB 714 did not make the underlying bill better. In many respects, it made it much worse, said Leigh Dundas of the opposition group Advocates for Physicians' Rights. Quote, "We are not going to comply," said parent Selena Mesa of Los Angeles. "We are not going to vaccinate our kids. I don't know what we are going to do. My kids love school. They don't want to homeschool. I honestly don't know what the next step is." Hundreds of parents have protested the bill since it was introduced this year, arguing that it would interfere with the doctor-patient relationship and that the restrictions would make doctors hesitant to write new medical exemptions. "Even with your amendments," quote, "even with your amendments, I do not believe I will be writing any more exemptions, even when I feel like they would be appropriate," said Dr. Dane Fliedner, an Aliso Viejo pediatrician specializing in holistic medicine, in a letter to Newsom. "I do not believe anyone else will either. I have had to put a complete moratorium on medical exemptions due to the nature of this legislation." Under SB 714, medical exemptions written before January 1st would not come under state scrutiny until a child needs a new one. New medical exemptions would be required when a child enters kindergarten, 7th grade, or changes schools. The provision lays out checkpoints similar to those used when the state phased out the use of vaccine exemptions based on personal or religious beliefs in 2015. The state would also restrict temporary vaccine exemptions to a 1-year timeline. While the protests have played out prominently in the Capitol, there remains strong support for requiring children to be immunized to attend school. Yeah, from dumb fucks, lobotomized zombies that should scarcely be driving on freeways if they're so stupid. A statewide survey in May by the nonpartisan Public Policy Institute of California has found 73% of adults believe parents should be required to vaccinate their children. The bills come amid the worst measles outbreak in more than 20 years, with more than 1,200 people diagnosed with the disease this year in the United States. Yeah, well, maybe when it's 10 times as bad, we'll see one child die, right? The amount of children that are killed in Chicago on any given Thursday, right, by gang murders in the streets and gunfire. So that's the article. That's basically what's going on. You know, it's again, they are reaching so far with this. They're stretching their arm out so far, and they're about to get their hand chopped off, right? This is like, this is that moment in Lord of the Rings when Saruman thinks that he's basically got the entire world dominated, and then the Ents come out of the forest and basically sack Isengard and basically take his whole castle. So basically, we're going to look at now the origins of this, and Leigh Dundas of Advocates for Physicians' Rights, examining the criminal nature of how this bill came to pass, that essentially the whole way that, you know, anybody, how did Pan even know that there were these fraudulent exemptions, right? This is, children's medical records are not public information. You can't just go look that up. In fact, there's strict federal guidelines and laws about the transmission of medical records, not just for children, like HIPAA, right? But for children, it's FERPA. Let me see, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, that, you know, it is a federal crime to transfer children's medical records without the consent of the parent. Absolutely it is. And that is actually how that they found out that these exemptions were being written in the first place. Was some of the cohorts of Senator Pan sent out these letters to all the health officers of the different school districts, essentially demanding that they send over to her office all of the medical exemptions that they had received from the parents. And no consent was requested or from the parents, and basically they just said, hey, transmit them over because we want them. So they committed massive federal crimes in starting this whole thing. And so this is basically Leigh Dundas calling for a federal investigation of these different health officers. Charity Dean, who was the Santa Barbara County health officer who sent out this letter, and now the letter's been made public, that they were publicly violating federal laws and transmitting children's health records, and this was the basis of all this draconian bullshit. So we'll listen to a little bit of this.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Debbie Schaefer. I am the Director of Media Relations for Advocates for Physicians' Rights. And now I'm going to turn it over to Human Rights Attorney Leigh Dundas. Yay.
Thank you all very much for coming out today. Today we are asking the Department of Justice and the California State Attorney General's Office to conduct in the state of California a top-down, full-scale investigation of the county health officers, medical doctors, nurses, and other licensed professionals who appear to have engaged in a multi-year campaign engineered to end run and or violate a multitude of federal and state laws which exist in the main to safeguard the privacy rights of the medical information of minor school children in the state, as well as coordinate any prosecutions, impositions of monetary fines, or licensure revocation proceedings against individuals found to have violated these laws. We are further asking the Department of Justice to investigate an apparent cover-up engaged in by these professionals during which they discussed how to avoid fallout from a, quote, Public Records Act request by co-opting their county council, county attorney's offices, to open permanent ongoing investigations against these minor children's medical doctors, which ongoing investigations they would, quote, just never close, because then the, quote, entire string of actions would, quote, never be revealed, plus it's got your county council protecting the actions by the attorney-client privilege. Which ruse these doctors appear to have planned to affirmatively use as a shield to camouflage their multi-year campaign against the disabled and medically compromised school children in the state, and about which ruse they then joked that if it failed, it was not cause for alarm because, quote, it is always fun to be sued by those whack jobs. To send to every school superintendent, every school principal, and every director of a daycare center a letter. And in this letter, she directed all of the foregoing personnel to, quote, immediately fax all medical exemptions, permanent or temporary, to the immunization program. She also appointed herself judge, jury, and ultimate arbiter of whether these medical exemptions she was asking people to fax were going to qualify under the newly passed SB 277 standards, or alternatively, if they did not do so, she would find them to be, quote, ineligible. Let me be nothing if not clear. Federal law squarely prohibits the actions taken by a campaign like Charity Dean's. I repeat, federal law prohibits the actions that were taken there. The primary federal law on point, the primary federal law on point is known as FERPA. It stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and it protects immunization records and medical exemptions that are part of immunization records as part of a student's educational record. Schools may only release these records for, quote, legitimate interests. And the federal government has made clear that campaigns like Dr. Charity Dean's, which involve a blanket release of this type of immunization data, violate federal law. In a case involving the Alabama Department of Education, the state health officer in Alabama ordered the release also be. Wow. The meeting actually devolved further, with one of the county health officers noting toward the end of the meeting, quote, I'm not really interested in going after the parents. There is a systems level opportunity here, and I personally would like to smoke out their physicians. Wow. At which point, around the same time on the record, another doctor chimed in, again, with the fact that if their little campaign failed, it wouldn't be cause for alarm because it is, quote, fun to be sued by those whack jobs. Again, if you missed my intro.
Alright, so basically, and that's, I'll put the link down below to this video of the press conference by Leigh, Dundas, and Advocates for Physicians' Rights. This was at the Capitol steps, and again, this bill that just passed both houses of the California Democrat-ruled California legislature, again, every single California Republican voted against it. I sincerely hope that enough people wake up and realize the nature of the Democrat Party as a result of this. And I see people, a fair amount of them on Twitter, saying, I've been a lifelong liberal Democrat, but I can never, in good conscience, vote for another Democrat again, and I've already changed my registration to a registered Republican, right? again, not all Republicans are perfect, but in California, right, if you're not a Republican, you're a communist and you're an idiot. And these people are now realizing that they've been supporting communists who don't care about them or their rights at all. And not only that, not only is the bill tyrannical, not only is it completely baseless, not only did they ram it through and circumvent the rules and evade actual health policy committees, but on top of that, it had its origins in fraud, as shown by this press conference. And hopefully the Department of Justice and, Attorney General William Barr and Trump will initiate an investigation into this, because this is a major deal. And, we know that Trump, he's posted on Twitter about autism and vaccines in the past since taking the presidency, and, kind of building a little bit of an affiliation with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He had to back off on that, and the only thing we've heard from him is in the last, several years, 3 years, is, the kids got to get their shots. Pretty much the weakest statement of support that he possibly could, while still, essentially voicing support. He's had to battle so many different things that he simply can't take on this front. This is a major, major front, and there's all these dumb, sycophant morons who support it. And so it's not just like going up against any other, dumb idea of the left. This one has the full backing of the cabal and the pharmaceutical industry. And again, that's their last bastion. This is their final holdout. This is Mordor. Also, another note, the approval, like public positive views, the pharmaceutical industry is now rated worse than the federal government. There's no other industry that people have a lower opinion of than the federal government, except for the pharmaceutical industry. It just tells you what you need to know about public perception of them right now. And so, FERPA, right, they committed federal crimes in sharing all this information. They violated the law of the federal government in order to get the documents on which they made the basis of, they're making fraudulent medical exemptions, right? So the entire basis of this thing is a crime. And just finishing up with some actual science about vaccines, and why all the people, the shills supporting them, are just total morons, just brainless, pea-brained, stupid idiots, right? Herd immunity, the whole basis of the whole thing. California's vaccination rates, even in the height of all this exemption hysteria, are still above 95%. They are freaking out about literally tiny, tiny percentages, and in many sense, for statewide, it's a fraction of a percent. But again, it's not about the kids. It's not about public health. They don't give a shit about public health. They will allow homeless people to do heroin and shit on the streets of San Francisco. Gavin Newsom used to be the mayor of San Francisco, right? Sacramento, it's the same thing. If Penn actually wanted to do something about public health, he'd be out there sweeping up homeless turds off the street. But no, he doesn't care. He's a shill for Pharma, and he'll do their bidding until his last gasping breath, right? And, there's herd immunity also began just as a concept in relation to actual diseases and immunity, and had nothing to do with vaccines. And the threshold that they set back then was 65% of what they determined was, once 65% of a population has natural immunity, the herd has immunity. At a certain point later on, they just appropriated it into the vaccine industry and set it to 95. There's literally no scientific basis behind that number whatsoever. Right? So herd immunity. Do you protect other people by getting vaccinated? For a vaccine to be able to create and sustain herd immunity, it must be able to prevent not only the symptoms of disease, but also the transmission, and the protection from the targeted infection must not wane. Can current vaccine products do this? Flu. No. The vaccine cannot prevent mucosal, such as in the nose, infection, and studies show it does not prevent transmission in household settings. Whooping cough. Pertussis. No. The vaccine cannot prevent colonization and transmission. It can only sometimes reduce symptoms for a limited time, about 18 months. During that time, vaccinated people, if exposed to whooping cough, can become silent carriers, infecting people without knowing it. Outbreaks are happening in and between fully vaccinated people. Tetanus. No, tetanus is not a communicable disease. Polio. No. Polio is spread via stool, and the vaccine used in the U.S. does not prevent gut colonization or excretion of polio virus in the stool. Mumps. No. The vaccine suffers from primary failure, many people never develop protection, and secondary failure, protection fades rapidly. The vaccine is in the trivalent MMR, and Merck is on trial in federal court accused by 2 of its own scientists of lying about the vaccine's effectiveness. Measles. No. Prior to the introduction of the measles vaccine, virtually everyone over the age of 15 in the U.S. was immune, and complications and fatalities were low. Healthy children with adequate nutrition and vitamin A and D supplies handled measles well, and gained not only lifetime immunity but other benefits, such as lower risk of some cancers. By the early 1960s, because living conditions in the U.S. were good for the majority of the population, annual measles fatalities were around 400 to 500. That's about the same as lightning strike fatalities. The vaccine came along and prevented infection in a narrow range of the childhood population, and so at first it looked like it worked great. Remember, everyone in the entire nation over 15 had lifetime immunity. But it was soon discovered that about 2 to 10% of vaccine recipients experience primary failure, they never develop immunity, and about 10% more lose protection within a decade. It's predicted that by 20 years out, 33% lose protection. Studies have shown a third vaccine dose does not extend protection. That means that after 60 years of mass vaccination campaigns, as the number who have natural lifetime immunity shrinks, we're moving into an era of far more people susceptible to measles than there were prior to the vaccine being introduced, which is likely why the CDC and other public health agencies around the world are panicking, not because of vaccine refusal, but because of vaccine failure. And here's a little quote down here at the end. Vaccination does not account for the impressive decline in mortality seen in the first half of the century. Once again, nearly 90% of the decline in infectious disease mortality among U.S. children occurred before 1940, when few antibiotics or vaccines were available. And this is information that I covered in my video, Are Vaccines Worth the Risk? A quantitative summary. I'll put that link down below and a thumbnail at the end. I've been attacked by a whole bunch of pro-vaccine shill cultists, and not one of them has addressed the information in this video. Not one. They claim to worship science. They claim to be basically just rubbing their nipples to science every night, and basically just pleasuring themselves to the idea of Neil deGrasse Tyson and what's his name in the wheelchair, right? They claim to worship and just love science so much, but they can't read a basic data table to save their life. They can't read data at all. All they have is a narrative. All they can process and receive is a narrative. They'll ignore the World Health Organization data and just go for the blurb at the top saying, oh, vaccines are safe, right? They don't care about what the numbers say. They only care about what the narrative is from their authorities. But as we've seen throughout, virtually all of human history, the conventional wisdom is always wrong. It's literally always wrong. What the majority of people believe is always bullshit, okay? And that's not to say you should go and become a flat earther, but it's to say that there's always things that we don't know, and every time these so-called experts and priestcraft, and these just pedophiles in white robes tell you, oh yeah, we know this for certain, they have no idea, and they're telling you for all ulterior political reasons. They have no certainty whatsoever. But they feed lies to people in order to harm them, and in order to enslave them, and in order to control them. And that's the exact same thing what's happening here. And here, exactly, the number one lie of them all. Multiple studies in multiple countries covering multiple decades with multiple research groups using multiple research models and multiple funding sources say vaccines are safe, vastly more so than the diseases they are designed to protect you from. It is absolutely false. We can prove it with their own data, as I did in this video. And if you're a pro-vaccine shill and you want to come and you want to prove to me that that's not the case, well, then take a look at the numbers and do it yourself and stop being a little bitch and actually respond to the numbers. Otherwise, I'm going to keep mocking you for being an illiterate loser like you are. Vaccinepapers.org, great place to start. Wealth of primary source scientific information about aluminum, about autism, about these adjuvants, and essentially the healthy user bias and all these things that really just shine a light on how they've been able to gaslight the entire population and convince them all of this gross, unbelievably sickening lie that vaccines are safe and effective. They are neither safe nor are they effective. They are a scam, and 100 years from now, we'll look back at this time and we'll see vaccines in the same category as leeches. And basically, yeah, it'll be in the same category as like the Spanish, the Catholic Inquisition. of just what supposedly was scientific, but was actually based on pure superstition and bullshit. And, you know, basically just quick review of the actual table that I went in that video, that essentially, to summarize, it's about 8 per million. That's the total risk of death or or of permanent injury from all of the pathogens that the vaccines are designed to prevent, from Hep B, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, rotavirus, flu, measles, mumps, rubella. 8 per million. That's your risk. So if you choose not to vaccinate, those are the odds you're playing with. 8 in a million. Said another way, 0.0008%. Right? So yeah, all the people who say, oh, your child's gonna die of measles if you don't vaccinate, you're a fucking moron. You're literally retarded, and I've got nothing to say to you except exactly that. And the costs, right, of the vaccines, when you actually tally up the numbers in the World Health Organization info sheets, and you multiply it by the doses as appropriate. Again, I kind of made a mistake in the first run, but I fixed it. And the true number that they are reporting in their own numbers, if you actually do the math, is 11.3%. Basically 1 in 10 chance, greater than 1 in 10 chance of your child being killed or permanently maimed by the vaccine. So, you know, you choose what odds make more sense to you, 8 per million or 1 in 10. As far as risking harm for your child. You know what? I'll take the 8 per million, bud. 1 in 10, you still got a, 89% chance if these numbers are correct, which I'm sure these are low balls. You know, again, autism is now 1 in 29 kids. That's 3% right there. That's not even listed here. All they list is other aspects of neural, degeneration from the aluminum adjuvants and the rest of it. It is just sickening. 1 in 10 at least. Lower bound. And the majority of that is from human papillomavirus, HPV, and the rotavirus. Oh yeah, also rotavirus is the least effective vaccine of them all. Over how many years of it being introduced, there has only been a 25% reduction in the infection rate. So not only is it extremely harmful, it is also completely useless. So yeah, basically, take out ARV and HPV, 2.3% risk of severe adverse event or death. From the vaccine schedule, altogether 11.3%. Said another way, the current risk of the vaccines and your child being permanently injured or killed by the vaccines is 14,660 times greater than the risk of permanent injury or death from the diseases they are designed to prevent. If you look at this math, which is World Health Organization, and if you think I'm wrong, feel free and prove it to me, because it's a good faith effort and nothing in here is attempt to be deceptive. If you look at these numbers and you think that an 8 per million chance of risking your child to diseases, again, if they survive, they have lower risk of cancer for the rest of their lives. They have immunity for the rest of their lives. If they're a girl, they will pass on that lifetime immunity to their children. Right, so it's 2 for 1. You get more than just their lifetime immunity. Their children now have immunity. If you look at that and you think 8 in a million in the wealthiest, most advanced country in the world, being a little Americaphilic there, but seriously, this is the wealthiest, most developed country in the world per capita. And if you think that that is more scary than a minimum 1 in 10 chance of doing permanent neurological damage to your child, you are a dumbass. You are a stupid, stupid person. And I don't even know what to say at that point, because you're a fucking moron. And if you want to sacrifice your child, I weep for your child. I am very sorry that you're a dumbass. You're a shill who can't think for yourself, and that you are going to sacrifice your own children and other people's children for the sake of your virtue signaling for science. When you can't even do science, you can't even read basic data tables to save your own wretched life. So that's my video today. SB 276 has passed, and we are going forward into the tyrannical future of California. But luckily, this is creating a revolution, a federation of parents who can see the evil, tyrannical nature of this and are banding together to form homeschool leagues. I will happily contribute my own resources and my own time to teach not just my own daughter, but to teach other children. I'm not qualified to teach everything, but I do have a degree in English and literature, and I would be happy to do what I can as part of this revolution in this federation to bring up the new generation of genius children. And, just to say, Isla is a genius. She is absolutely developing insanely faster than the development schedule that they tell people. I think that basically over time they have literally slowed down the milestones and made them later and later because kids are getting dumber and dumber as a result of the mass vaccination campaign. IQs are going down. Kids are getting more stupid. And you know what? The things that they tell people are straight up lies. A friend of ours basically just, in a conversation, said that basically her dentist for her children recommended basically giving them fluoride to ingest on a daily basis, as if that was going to help their teeth. There's no benefit to ingesting fluoride for your teeth. The only even hypothetical benefit is basically to adding fluoride in the drinking water is that it touches your teeth and has that contact effect, but in no way does consuming fluoride do anything beneficial for your teeth. In fact, there's a significant amount of kids today that have dental fluorosis, and that is a result of overaccumulation of fluoride in the body, and that's just their teeth. Imagine what that fluoride is doing to their organs and their nervous system. We are mutilating an entire generation, or at least the parents who are ignorant are mutilating an entire generation. And it's up to us, the parents who are awake and who can see through this control grid. It's up to us to basically fight back, and it's up to us to basically protect these kids from the evil, insane ramblings and tyrannical, hubristic overreach of these politicians, of these just faithless, godless Democrats who would rather defend the right of a transsexual to shit in the street with a heroin needle sticking out of their arm than to actually protect the rights of children, of the legal residents, the God-fearing residents who actually have rights in this country, or at least in theory. But that's my video today. God bless all of you, except for the vaccine shills. May God curse you and cast you into the fires, because that's where you belong. And yeah. I hope you all have a great day. If any of you live in California, in the state of California, especially in the kind of central California area up here in the Sierra Nevadas even, I encourage you to contact me, Mango Thunder Slice at pm.me, and we are going to help and participate in creating this confederation of parents who are fighting against the medical tyranny, and we'll be homeschooling. And we'll be helping each other out to make sure that our children can get an education and not be reliant on the state control grid. So that's my video today. I hope you all have a great day, a great week, and a great lifetime. And I'll be talking to you again soon. Cheers.